There were two families looking to adopt, and we were allowed to choose for ourselves. In my previous life, I chose the Chen family, a household that ran a tiny grocery store. They didn't have much money to spare, but they cherished me like a rare piece of candy. They wholeheartedly supported my passion for drawing, which eventually helped me become a somewhat well-known illustrator. Xia Mir, on the other hand, had chosen the Wang family. They were wealthy, indeed, but the atmosphere in their home was icy and distant. She tried for over 10 years but still couldn't manage to warm up that household. Given the chance to start over, the moment I saw the silhouettes of the Chen couple, my throat choked up, and I almost blurted out Mom and Dad. But Xia Mir was one step faster. She darted forward like a little squirrel discovering a stash of nuts, her voice clear and carrying a hint of coquettishness. Mother Director, I want to go home with the uncle and auntie who run the grocery store. I love snacks, and I promise I'll be a good girl. She threw herself straight into Auntie Li Chiomai's embrace, as affectionately as a child who had finally found her safe haven. I stood behind her, motionless. If my guess was correct, she had also been reborn. What about an inn? What do you think? The orphanage director bent down and asked me with a smile. I am fine with anything. Uncle Wang and Aunt Shin are also very nice. She paused slightly, looking at me as if I were an old soul, surprisingly calm for my age. I glanced over at Xia Mir. She was holding the Qing couple's hands and swaying them gently, her voice soft and sweet. Uncle, Auntie, I really like you too. Can I call you Mom and Dad right now? Auntie Li Chiomai was momentarily taken aback by such enthusiasm. Her eyes rimmed red, both moved and flustered. Jianhe, look at this child. Uncle Chen Jianhe smiled kindly. He hurriedly wiped his rough hands on his trouser legs before cautiously patting Xia Mir's head. All right, good girl. As long as you want to, our home is your home. Watching that scene, my heart felt as if someone had scooped out a piece of ice cream with a tiny spoon, leaving behind a faint, bittersweet taste. Mir and I grew up together, as inseparable as a body and its shadow. I knew perfectly well that she wasn't inherently bad, she was simply too desperate for a true home. In our past life, even though the Chen family wasn't wealthy, they gave me everything. That was the exact sense of family she had always dreamed of. We were both orphans. I understood her choice, it was just that there was still a fleeting, hard-to-hide sadness in my heart. After the paperwork was completed, I followed the Wang couple out to the black car parked out front. As we passed by each other, Auntie Li Chiomai seemed somewhat apologetic. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a handful of candies, and gently pressed them into my palm. They were exactly the type of candy I loved most in my previous life. Good girl, take these to eat. From now on, you have a home. A rich household is different from a normal one. You must be good, and don't let yourself suffer any grievances. The candies still held the warmth of her pocket, and my eyes stung slightly. In my heart, I silently thanked her for the years she and Uncle had spent raising me in my past life. In this life, Mir will cherish you in my place. Uncle Wang Zhishan politely opened the car door for Aunt Shin Yayang. She turned back to look at me. Anen, get in the car. I've already told Nanny Li at home to prepare a room for you. Her voice was gentle but maintained a distance, almost as if she were welcoming a tiny guest. In our past life, Mir once told me that when she first arrived at the Wang family, everyone was cold and unapproachable. Later, when they had their own biological child, she was neglected even more. She said that wasn't the ideal family she wanted. However, just through this brief interaction, I felt differently. A family willing to thoughtfully prepare everything for a child they had never even met, how could they truly be cold-hearted? Watching the scenery blur past the window, the silhouettes of Mir's new family gradually faded away. I suddenly realized something: any relationship, if not nurtured with genuine care, will rarely yield true affection in return. The streetlights flickered on one after another, and I let out a long breath. My new life officially began here. 40 minutes later, the car stopped in front of a villa. There was no grand scene of servants swarming out to welcome us like I had imagined. There was only a nanny in uniform waiting by the door. "Sir, madam, everything has been prepared as instructed." She took my backpack, smiling gently. Aunt Shinya Young gently held my hand, her eyes mild. "Anen, from now on, this is your home. Your room is on the second floor. If there's anything you aren't used to, just tell Nanny Lee or come find me." I followed her upstairs. The moment I pushed open the bedroom door, I couldn't help but freeze for a beat. On the study desk sat a complete set of imported art supplies, and next to it was a professional sketchbook. Aunt Shin observed my reaction, her voice remaining steady. "The director mentioned you like to draw. Uncle Wang had someone prepare these on our way back. Do you like them?" I looked at her. She wasn't overly eager with questions, nor did she force me to adapt immediately. She just maintained a proper distance, waiting for me to take the initiative to respond. "I like them very much." "Thank you, Auntie," I nodded, my voice serious. She seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. "It's good that you like them. Go take a shower and rest. Come down for dinner in half an hour." Dinner proceeded in such quietness that I could clearly hear the soft clinking of cutlery. Uncle Wang and Aunt Shin occasionally exchanged a few words about an art exhibition or a symphony orchestra. They didn't intentionally disrupt their daily rhythm just because of my arrival. In the past life, Xia Mir often complained that the Wang family was as cold as a block of ice, making her feel suffocated. She claimed they only adopted her to have another child around to fill the emptiness. I suddenly recalled my days with the Chin family. The three of us would squeeze around a tiny tea table. Dad Chin would constantly pile meat into my bowl, his voice booming, and an "Eat more, you're growing." That warmth, that lively noise, so deeply infused with the breath of everyday life, was indeed the polar opposite of the Wang family's quietness right now. Back then, we were young and inexperienced, failing to understand that every family has its own way of loving. But now, looking at the light yet highly nutritious dishes prepared specifically for a young child, I had my answer. The affection of the Wang couple was rooted in respect and tolerance. They weren't used to passionate displays of emotion, but they were thorough and attentive to a degree that was practically flawless. For a girl like Xia Mir, who constantly craved attention and embraces, this kind of measured care felt like coldness and discomfort. But I was not her. I knew perfectly well how precious this undisturbed freedom, paired with abundant resources, was to an artist. A week later, the orphanage director came to visit. She pulled me aside into the garden, lowering her voice. "Anen, are you getting used to living here? If anything is making you unhappy, you must tell me." I shook my head and pointed to the easel. "Aunt Shin has hired a professional art teacher for me. She's coming tomorrow." The orphanage director's eyes grew complex. This child had always been much calmer than Xia Mir since she was little. Yesterday, Mir called me, sounding very happy. She said Dad Chin took her to the night market and bought her a lot of colorful hair clips. I just smiled and said nothing. That was the Chen family's way of expressing affection, passionate and direct, completely different from the Wang family. Mir had always liked flashy and sparkling things. I wasn't surprised she chose the Chen family. "But you," the director patted my head, "sometimes even adults like me can't fully understand your thoughts." I lowered my head, sketching the outlines of a white orchid trying to stand steady in the wind. I wasn't overly profound, I just knew what I wanted. During my days at the Wang household, I quietly organized my new life. My body was only 9 years old, but my soul was that of a 24-year-old. When holding the professional paintbrush, a familiar feeling rushed back, but I held myself in check. I couldn't immediately paint works that were too mature. That would make people suspicious. I needed to progress step by step, naturally, like a child learning to hold a pen for the first time. Occasionally, Uncle Wang Zhishan would walk past the painting room. Looking at my brushstrokes, a flash of surprise would appear in his eyes. "Anan, your strokes are very expressive, but they seem to carry a bit of somberness that doesn't match your age." I put down the pen, looked up, and smiled lightly. Because Uncle Wang's house is so quiet, I wanted to paint that feeling. He gently patted my shoulder, his eyes holding a hint of appreciation. Just as I was gradually getting used to the pace of life here. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Xiaomir, sent from the new phone the Chen family had bought for her. A photo popped up. On a bed was a set of ordinary art supplies, and her face was radiant. Behind her was the small, narrow, but cozy living room of the Chen family. And then, look. Mom and Dad bought me a whole set of drawing tools. They said as long as I like it, no matter how hard they have to work, they will let me learn to draw. The feeling of being supported by the whole family, you probably don't have that over there, do you? Before I could even reply, the next message arrived. I also signed up for a drawing class at the Children's Palace. The teacher said I have talent. Anan, I want to be an artist in the future. Do you think I can do it? I looked at the familiar brands of paintbrushes in the photo. Those were the ones I had used the most in my previous life because the price was affordable and the quality was decent. I replied with a smiling emoji. That is good too. She had finally gotten the life she desired. I sincerely wished her well, hoping she would find the warmth she had always been looking for. As for me, I believed that in this life, I would also walk on a much clearer, brighter path. Time passed by in silence. 8 months later, the news of Aunt Shen Yayang's pregnancy brought a noticeable change to the entire household. The first change was the atmosphere. The originally quiet villa now saw an influx of various tonics and baby supplies. Nanny Li worked even more carefully, even her footsteps were a bit lighter. At the same time, scattered gossip began to reach my ears. That day, I had finished school early. Passing by the sunroom, I accidentally overheard a female relative of the Wang family chatting with Nanny Li. I said it before, how can an adopted child compare to a biological one? Now that Yayang is pregnant, that girl Anan must be in an awkward position in this house. Nanny Li lowered her voice, keep it down, Anan is a sensible child. What's the use of being sensible? Are they going to divide the property with an outsider? Just wait and see. When the baby is born, sooner or later, she will be sent back to the orphanage or put into a boarding school. I stood in the shadows, my heart calm and unruffled. I almost wanted to chuckle. Such words. Mia must have heard them countless times in our previous life. Because of that, she gradually became sensitive and paranoid, always stubbornly trying to prove herself, only to accidentally push away the affection she originally had. I didn't step in to argue. I just quietly turned around and went to the kitchen. Aunt Shen was heavily pregnant recently and couldn't stand the smell of grease. I made a warm glass of honey lemon water and sliced some ginger to put on the side. She was leaning against the sofa, eyes closed, resting. Her complexion indeed wasn't good. I walked over and gently placed the glass on the table. Mom, drinking this will make you feel better. She opened her eyes and looked at the ginger slices floating in the glass, a complex look flashing in her eyes. Anan, did you hear something? She was referring to the gossip outside. I sat down next to her and didn't answer directly, just smiled softly. Mom, I know we are going to have a little brother or sister soon. I'm very happy. She paused slightly. Perhaps she had prepared a lot of words to coax, explain, or even probe. But she didn't expect my reaction to be so simple and pure. She held my hand, her voice softening. Aren't you afraid that after Mom and Dad have our biological child, we won't love you anymore? I shook my head and looked straight into her eyes. Mom and Dad taught me that one must keep their word. You and Dad said this is my home, and I believe it. Besides, love doesn't disappear when it's shared, it multiplies. Aunt Shen's eyes turned red. She pulled me into her arms. Yes, love can only multiply. Anan will always be the eldest daughter of the Wang family. At dinner, Dad Wang returned, and that female cousin was still there. At the dining table, she continued to drop subtle hints about the expenses for the upcoming baby. Jishan, raising a biological child will be very expensive in the future. You should save on unnecessary expenses. Dad Wang put down his chopsticks, making a sharp, dry sound. The atmosphere in the dining room instantly fell silent. He looked at the cousin, his voice deep and cold. Anan is my daughter. Her education fund and trust fund have been prepared since the day she stepped into this house. The Wang family hasn't reached the point where we have to cut back on our daughter's share to provide for our son. I don't want to hear such words again. Mom Shen also calmly added, Anan is sensible. During the difficult times of my pregnancy, she has been the most thoughtful. Anyone who makes her suffer grievances is showing no respect for me. Seeing that the situation was unfavorable, the cousin could only stay silent. She left right after finishing her meal. I sat at the table, quietly sipping my soup with the look of a young philosopher who had just witnessed the truth of life, an indescribable warmth rising in my heart. It turns out that as long as you take the initiative to give sincerely, even a seemingly cold home can gradually become warm. After the meal, Dad Wang called me into the study. He took out an agreement from his drawer. Anan, this is the art exhibition sponsorship contract I promised. I've already signed it. Whatever you like, Dad will support it. He looked at me, his eyes carrying appraisal and satisfaction. What you told your mom today, she has already told me. Anan, you surprised me. I took the agreement. Thank you, Dad Wang. Still calling me Dad Wang? He raised an eyebrow slightly, rarely showing a teasing intent. I immediately corrected myself. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Mom. That night, my phone buzzed again. It was a notification from Xia Mir's social media circle. The photo showed an easel and quite expensive art supplies that Dad Chen had bought for her. It came with a status update. Although my family isn't rich, Dad said I am his only treasure, irreplaceable by anyone. I turned off the screen, paying no mind to that subtle boasting. Actually, a few days ago, I had secretly sent a sum of money to the Chen family under the guise of an educational support fund. In my previous life, around this time, Dad Chen's back injury would relapse. That money would not only help improve their daily life but also be enough for him to get checked and treated at a large hospital. Mom Shen's expected due date fell in the spring. Just before the delivery day, Xia Mir suddenly called me. Anan, I heard Uncle Wang and Aunt Shen are having a baby soon. People say that after having a biological child, adoptive families no longer care about their adopted children. Are you really okay right now? I hung up the phone straight away. In our past life, on this exact day, she had locked herself in her room, crying until she was exhausted because she felt she was being abandoned again. As for me, I was currently sitting in the Wang family's car, on the way to the hospital. The Wang family's pace was as swift and decisive as usual. Even in this situation, everything was clearly arranged. The private maternity team was already prepared. Dad Wang canceled an important meeting to wait outside the delivery room. His silhouette remained steady, but I could clearly see his fingers trembling slightly. The decisive man in the business world now revealed a very genuine anxiety. Dad, don't worry. Mom is in good health, she will be safe. I walked over and gently held his sleeve. He turned and gently pushed up his glasses. And Mei Chem, Dad isn't worried. You don't be scared either, Mom will be fine. A few hours later, the cry of a little life rang out. My little brother, Wang Nanchuan, was born. When the nurse carried the baby out, Wang Zhishan was as stiff as a stone statue. He reached out his hands, wanting to hold him but not daring to touch, looking at me for help. Anan, he's so soft, where should I put my hands? I suppressed a laugh, teased him a bit, and stepped forward to adjust his posture. Dad, are you asking a child like me for help now? One hand supports the neck, the other supports the bottom. That's right, just like that. Jishan, looking like a special agent who had just received highly classified documents, held his breath and concentrated on holding the tiny baby, who looked like a little monkey. In that moment, the cold facade on his face completely collapsed, revealing a clumsy tenderness. He even proudly, yet subtly, brought the baby closer to me. "Anan, look, does he look like Mom?" I looked at the wrinkled baby, my heart softening. In my previous life, Xiamir said this child was the enemy who stole everything from her. But I understood that the child was innocent, and the parents were innocent. The tragedy in the past life happened because the Wang parents were accustomed to showing love through rules and material things, while Mia needed emotional value and comfort. One side didn't know how to give, and the other side frantically demanded. In the end, it only caused both of them to get hurt. I had struggled at the bottom of society, seeing couples fight over a few cents, seeing relatives turn against each other for profit, so I understood just how precious the Wang family's decency was. They weren't good at coaxing children, so I would be the bridge to connect them. On the day Mom Shin was discharged from the hospital, the Wang family threw a small family gathering. During the party, Wang Zhishan took out a file and placed it in front of us. "This is Nanchuan's birth gift." He paused for a moment before taking out another document. "And this one is for Anan. The villa with the painting studio in the suburbs, Dad has already transferred it to your name. Additionally, priority agency rights for the Wang Group's creative division have also been included in the plans for when you come of age." The surrounding relatives were all stunned. Wang Zhishan looked around, his voice calm but authoritative. "Whatever Nanchuan has, Anan will also have. As the eldest daughter of the Wang family, she deserves to receive even more." Mom Shin leaned against a soft pillow, holding my hand and smiling at everyone. These past few days, I really have to thank Anan. Zhishan wanted to change Nanchuan's diaper but didn't know how. It was all Anan who learned first and then taught her dad. If it weren't for this daughter, the two of us wouldn't be able to handle this little demon king. Time flew by. With Nanchuan around, the Wang household was indeed a bit chaotic, but under my mediation, that chaos became warm. As a result, I became an indispensable calming presence in this family. From the age of 13, the name of the genius Xiamir resonated throughout the children's palace. That year, she won the gold medal in the citywide youth painting competition. At the age of 15, she started posting illustrations online and quickly became famous for her healing art style. She used her entire first royalty payment to buy new household appliances for the Chen family. Every market trend she successfully caught was actually based on the experience I had spent nearly 10 years accumulating in my previous life. She was using my standard answer key to take the test. Naturally, it was smooth sailing. By the age of 17, Xiamir had become a well-known teenage genius in the industry. At 18, she reached her peak when she officially signed a contract with the top illustration studio in the country. In my previous life, it wasn't until I was 22, after countless rejections and revisions, that I struggled to step foot in there. She was a full 4 years earlier than me. Right after signing the contract, she called me. "Anan, I signed with the studio." Her voice carried a fanaticism that bordered on obsession. "The teacher at the studio said I'm the most spiritually gifted artist they've ever met." I could hear the noise of a celebration party on the other end of the line. "Congratulations, Mir." My voice was as calm as if I were hearing news from a stranger. "Are you really just going to say that one sentence? I remember you loved drawing the most when we were little. Why didn't you keep drawing later on?" I walked to the window and watched Dad Wang playing soccer with Nanchuan in the garden. The normally stern man was now crouching on the grass without a care for his image, wiping his son's face. Mom Shin sat in a rattan chair, holding one of my sketches, chatting gently with Nanny Lee. "My direction is different now. I want to try a different path," I replied. "Keep it up, calm your mind, and you will do well." Mir sounded resentful. "Of course. I will definitely do better than you." After saying that, she hung up. I looked at the black screen, smiling in self-mockery. She thought I was forcing myself to act unaffected. But she didn't know that the things she frantically copied were merely the techniques I had honed to survive. Meanwhile, what I learned at the Wang household in this life was vision and capability. She pursued early fame, while I pursued a solid foundation. After dinner, Dad Wang called me into the study and took out a thick stack of documents. "Anin, tomorrow is your 18th birthday. Over the years, you've studied drawing with masters to cultivate patience. But Dad knows your mind isn't just on paper." I took the documents and saw the title, Asset Restructuring Plan for the Wang Group's Creative Division. Over the past few years, the proposals you put forward for the company's creative division have all been monitored by my secretary, and the results have been excellent. Dad Wang clasped his fingers together, his voice serious. "When you come of age, Dad will transfer 30% of the creative division's shares to your name. From tomorrow, you will be the CEO of this division. Dad is giving you a platform, capital, and the full resources of the Wang family." My heart beat fast. In my previous life, I was just an artist buried in a studio, staying up all night for a few thousand yuan in royalties. In this life, the Wang family was handing me the ticket to control the game. "Thank you, Dad." I looked up, my eyes resolute. "Good." Dad Wang smiled with satisfaction. "At the birthday banquet tomorrow, Dad will officially announce this news." My 18th birthday banquet was held in the garden of the Wang family's old villa. Dad Wang led me through the crowd, introducing me to the powerful shareholders and high-ranking executives. Today is not only an An's coming-of-age ceremony but also a new beginning for the Wang Group's creative division. Starting today, An will officially take on the position of CEO with independent decision-making authority. Murmurs of surprise rang out. A few old shareholders who were waiting to watch the drama of a wealthy family's adopted child failing were instantly silenced when I used accurate industry forecasts and sharp financial thinking to shut them down. I held my wine glass, smiling politely yet distantly. The sharpness I gained from struggling at the bottom of society in my past life, combined with the top-tier vision bestowed by the Wang family in this life, made me feel like a fish in water in this game of power. "Anin, you did better than I expected." Dad Wang stood beside me, his voice full of pride. I smiled, but a fleeting sense of loss passed through my heart. Standing at the center of power at this moment, I thought back to the old, sallow desk lamp of the Chen family. I thought, if it were Dad Chen from my previous life, right now he would definitely be clapping enthusiastically and showing off to the neighbors, "Look, my daughter is on TV." I stood on the balcony, looking out at the city's brilliant lights. I figured Xiaomia must be sitting in a luxurious studio right now, enjoying the halo of a teenage genius. She was one step ahead of me on my old path. As long as she calmed her mind and relied on the experience I left behind, she would definitely help the Qin parents live a wealthy life. I didn't hate her. In fact, at this moment, I truly hoped she would stand firm. However, as the party was ending, my phone vibrated. It was a voice message from Xiaomia. Her voice was trembling, breaking with sobs. "And why have I worked so hard, yet I still can't achieve anything?" I set my glass down, went to a quiet corner of the garden, and checked the trending searches. Xiaomia's name sat squarely at the top, teenage genius caught in plagiarism scandal. It turned out that in her rush to recreate the glory of the masterpiece that made me famous in my previous life before she turned 18, her inspiration had dried up. She relied on her memory to replicate a few discarded sketches that I had never published in my past life, sketches I had only shown her when we were still close. But she forgot that the aesthetic tastes of this era had changed. Her hasty, greedy brushstrokes made the healing style look cheap and rigid. To avoid risks, the studio was preparing to terminate her contract and demand compensation. She had snatched the map, but because she ran too fast, she ended up falling headfirst into a pit she had dug herself. A week later, I met Xiaomia at a suburban cafe. The sun was still bright, but the girl sitting opposite me had dark, gloomy circles under her eyes. I didn't plagiarize. Those were things in my head. She gripped her coffee cup tightly, her fingernails still stained with unwashed paint. Anan, why is it that when you draw, you're a genius, but when I draw, they say I lack dedication? Why? I looked at her and calmly slid a piece of paper across the table. On it was written, May 12, 2004, Dad Chen's back injury relapses. April, Mom Chen secretly sells the gold ring her grandmother left behind just to buy you a set of imported watercolors. Xia Mier's head jerked up, her pupils shrinking. How did you know? Because I experienced all of that in my previous life. I was reborn too. From the day you snatched the Chen family, I knew. The air in the cafe seemed to freeze. Xia Mier's mouth gaped open, speechless. You envied how I was cherished, envied how I could draw with peace of mind. So you stole my family, copied my style, and even wanted to complete my achievements ahead of schedule. I looked straight into her eyes, enunciating every word. But you forgot that the healing style is the sedimentation of sincerity drawn from the warmth of the Chen family. It's not something that can be synthesized by a few market rules. I continued, you stole the map, but you still have to walk the path yourself. You only saw the trophy at the finish line, but ignored the stones that cut my feet along the way. You thought it was a shortcut, but it was actually an abyss. Xia Mier completely broke down. She buried her face in her hands on the table and sobbed like a child abandoned by the whole world. I just wanted to be loved. I wanted to be as excellent as you so they wouldn't leave me. I looked at her, and the lingering barrier in my heart finally dissolved. She wasn't inherently bad, she was just too starved for affection and too greedy. I stood up and gently patted her shoulder. Mir, Dad Chen, and Mom Chen are still waiting for you at home. What they love isn't a teenage genius, but the Xia Mir who loves snacks. Go back. Realizing it now is not too late. After that meeting, Xia Mir voluntarily left the illustration industry. She used all her savings to pay the breach of contract compensation, then returned to the old grocery store with the Chen parents. A year later, at the annual anniversary gala of Wang Creative, I stood under the spotlight facing rows of camera lenses. The goal of Wang Creative is not to harvest traffic, but to protect the cultural values that are gradually disappearing. My demeanor was calm, every gesture exuding the noble elegance cultivated by the Wang family. In the audience, Dad Wang and Mom Shen looked at each other and smiled. Wang Nanchuan sat in the front row, waving his hands and shouting, "Sister." In this moment, I possessed power and a platform that I wouldn't have dared to dream of in my previous life. I snapped out of my reminiscence and bent down to sign the contract announced at the launch event. In my previous life, I chose simple warmth. In this life, I embraced profound solemnity. Stepping off the stage, I opened my sketchbook. Next to an old photo of two little girls, I wrote a single sentence. Life cannot be stolen, there are only choices made anew. May we, in this life, no longer envy one another. The end.